Burt has been an employee of Lumon, a very high up employee of Lumon. And for whatever reason, like recently, maybe he was even a honey trap for Irving.
Yeah.
Maybe they were like, put him down there, have them accidentally run into each other.
I guess
we can find out how much Irving knows. He's been falling asleep at work and having nightmares about a hallway.
Welcome back to the break room. Everyone at Lumon is horny, which is great because we're all horny for this show. That's right. It's time to discuss episode 6 of Severance season 2, Attila, a pet name that you should not use with your significant other.
It's a
Please
bad pet
don't.
name.
It's a bad pet name. I'm John Costa. Joining me to answer all of your questions. She is eradicating childish folly from her essence. It's Gina Ippolito.
I'm about to grow up.
Grow! He got severed to avoid going to hell. It's Brandon Barrick.
You'll never take me, devil.
Unfortunately, Eric's Audi is out on an elongated cruise voyage today, but he'll be back next week. So that's good news for you guys. Wow. Okay. There's a lot to unpack in this episode. I'm tempted to almost like just jump right in. Normally we talk about what we really liked from this episode or what we learned from Lumon, but there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Truly, there's like, I think a lot in the seams of this episode that is easy to miss.
Jump in.
Should we just jump in? I've categorized this episode by faction because not a lot of interaction happened in this episode.
Yeah.
There was sort of like a Milchick moment.
Yeah.
There was a Drummond moment. There was Mark with Helly and Helena. Mark with Reghabi.
Mark with Helly and Helly.
Reghabi, thank you, sorry. And then Dillon and his wife, and then Irv and Burt and all that kind of stuff. So I've sort of categorized this episode into those groupings.
I'm here
and we'll
for
start with like maybe least interesting to most interesting, or roughly the chronology of the episode.
You're gonna get mean letters about what you put as least interesting here.
In this episode, I'm going to start with Milchick.
Okay.
Because most of the Milchick stuff we get is him continuing to break down a little bit. And maybe, his disdain for Lumon grows. But he spent most of this episode practicing his paper clipping.
So he's still drinking the Kool-Aid because if he didn't, he was like, ugh. At the end, he was like, so many paper clips.
Yeah. Do you think that handshaking thing was just like, I've paper clipped so many things that I'm getting like arthritic?
Yeah,
or
I think it's like
he was like enraged and getting...
No, I think it was like anytime you keep doing it, like anything over and over and over again, eventually you're just like, oh, I feel like I'm going to barf. I've done this too much.
Yeah, Milchick because I understand why he's doing it, right? It's the sunk cost fallacy. He's so deep in this organization. He's got to buy it, right?
He's just got a big promotion.
He's got a big promotion. He's also becoming more, he's being less like Milchick. He's eliminating his big words.
Yeah.
He's being meaner, right?
Yeah,
he's very mean to Miss Huang. This episode, he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna be gone for a little bit. Don't come to the break room, or the supply closet. Also, you can't sit in my office. You're running things, but you can't sit in my office."
That almost felt like a callback to the Miss Cobell thing on his computer, where he was like, "This is my space." And people keep trying to kind of come into my space, but I am the severed floor manager. Don't fuck with me.
And I think this is him acting more Cobell. Yeah. Like, I bet this is something Cobell did to him, when Cobell would be like, Milchick, I'm going to be gone for a little bit. You're in charge, but don't sit in my office.
Yeah.
This is something that we didn't get a Cobell anything this episode.
No, she's been gone.
She's been gone a while.
There's still this big kind of like Cobell face cutout thing in the intro of this season.
Oh, I think she's coming back.
Very prevalent in that intro, so it feels to me like this hiatus has been kind of strange.
I think they want to lull us into a false sense of security that she is gone, but she's up to something behind the scenes. I think she's going to pop out when you least expect it.
What do you think she is up to?
I think she's going around Helena Egan in an interesting way. And trying to get closer to James Egan. Is that her father?
Jane.
Jane Egan.
Yeah.
I think and because the show it gives us Mark's. It's mostly Mark's perspective, right? But we also get Irv, and we get all the innies' perspectives.
Yeah, this was a pretty evenly split episode.
And we see things from Helena's perspective as far as how the company is going. Sometimes it's Seth Milchick, sometimes it's like Natalie, but like it's mostly Helena. And I think because Helena doesn't know what Cobell's up to, we don't know.
I think she's put her out of her mind. I think to a family like the Egans, the underlings, there's no belief that the underlings could come back to bite him in the ass.
While we're talking about Milchick, can we talk about the mirror shot?
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
I think it's a practical shot where there was, because you see the shot is behind Milchick.
Yeah.
He's looking in the mirror. He's looking directly at camera. Camera pushes in. We never see the camera in the mirror, obviously. I think they have a body double facing the camera, and then as they push it, like it's not a mirror, it's glass.
Oh,
and on the other side of the
very
glass.
possible.
I thought it was an angled shot.
I think that maybe that the mirror
but
is
it's
small
like
enough.
straight on.
No,
I don't know.
I thought it was like just over his shoulder, just out of frame.
I don't know.
That
That's
is
what I
certainly a
thought.
technique used in filmmaking a lot to do things like this.
Yeah. I think they
It's very possible.
I did not watch the after show.
After the episode.
After
You know
the
what?
episode
You know what I
closed, they
don't care
talk about
for
it?
is that Apple TV pulls up the next
I know.
show.
I know it's
It's
kind of
rude.
hard to
And
get
it's
to.
hard to
rude.
get. It's hard to like be like, no, I don't want that show. I want to watch to
Right.
the end of this show, Apple TV.
Right. I don't want to watch Shrinking Season 2. Take it away from me.
Yikes. Harrison Ford's gonna Red Hulk after
He's
you.
gonna, yeah.
Okay, there's again, like I said, there's a lot to cover. I want to move on to.
Yeah.
You hate Milchick. We get it.
No, I don't
Yes,
hate
you
Milchick,
think
but he didn't
he's
have a lot to
the
do this
weakest.
episode. I want to move on to Dillon and Gretchen.
Oh, real quick before.
Dillon and
Sorry, with
Gretchen.
Milchick, him yelling "grow,
Grow.
grow."
Yeah.
This goes back to my theory.
He
that-
has ED.
no. That because it's
What are
grow
you
up, it's grow up, and then it's grow. My whole thing is, and I know a lot of people think this. I think the Lumon is growing people.
Yeah,
Like their
clones.
livestock. That was the first thing like Helly said was, "Am I livestock?"
Right.
And she said, Helena has said they're fucking animals.
Yeah, and also there's no. They wanted to see if they had belly buttons.
Right. Kiri,
No, they wanted to see if they had pouches, but
Pouches.
in the same thing, it's like
Right.
We thought belly
you
buttons.
Kiri
also-
get one of the
we thought
first
belly buttons.
paintings of Kira we saw was him whipping some sort of goat man, like turning,
The
all that.
The waffle
wine
party.
bottle
Right.
is like Spanish for goat.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And
Miss Huang, I think, is like grown. She is not an outside person. She was grown inside of Lumon, and I'm wondering now if like Milchick was grown inside of Lumon, and him
But
being
he
like
rides
that,
a motorcycle.
him yelling "grow" at himself.
Clones don't
Clones
ride
can't
motorcycles.
I don't know. That's it. Now we can stop talking about Milchick.
Okay, one Brandon theory, write it down. The last Brandon theory that he proposed in the break room, the showrunner laughed in his face. I just wanted to say.
He didn't laugh. He said interesting, and I saw him write it down real fast on the side. So we'll see.
Texted his buddies at
Yeah,
Marvel. Okay, but talking about Dillon and Gretchen, we get two scenes here. We get the Innie Dillon scene, we get the
Yeah.
Outie Dillon scene. The Innie Dillon scene, pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Because she ends up lying about going.
Because
she says it was
likes
canceled.
the innie more than the outie.
And I think this was a Gina was right moment where a couple of
Yes.
weeks ago, I think we all sort of were like, oh, she's going to fall for Innie Dillon. And it seems like that's what's very clearly happening.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. The Innie Dillon is probably like what her husband was like when they first met. And he was attentive and he was like, I like your face. Can I please hug? And then Outie Dillon is like, I got kids. I'm not good at anything. I just want,
And she's like, please don't buy a car.
Yeah. And he like can't figure out how to make cookies.
They're going to be giving me money.
Yeah, that's like and
Dillon.
also when she says to Innie Dillon, like he's like, what was our first date? Scuba? And she's like, no, but you did take scuba lessons, which also, by the way, the line "which ocean" made me cackle.
Yeah, that is
because she's
good.
like, well, it was in a pool, and then he's like, cool, and then she's like, they were pretty expensive, and it's like this woman has been paying for everything for this couple.
Right.
You can tell she's a mother to 2 kids, and she's got a job, and she's paying for everything. So when he's like, I want to go to the lot and buy a car, and she just like sits there,
Right.
you can tell that she's like, I should have just stayed with
I mean,
Innie
he's
Dillon.
contributing to the household income, we assume. He's
right,
getting paid.
right, but it is we have learned that he's had a hard time holding a job down.
Right.
Yes.
And I thought that what you're saying, Gina, was sort of sad and sweet, where he was like, oh well, maybe my Outie is just trying to find what he excels at,
Yeah.
like I do here.
Yeah.
And I think
then-
that's an attractive quality that Gretchen never sees in Dillon because he's severed.
Yeah.
And so seeing him excel at work, I don't know if he's really excelling at work, but whatever.
Yeah, who knows?
I think that is an attractive trait. And now you talked about Gretchen's, being the breadwinner of the household. I want to bring something up that's very interesting here.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
We had learned a couple of episodes, I think that she was a teacher, is that right?
No, cop or something.
We saw her in like a uniform.
Oh,
We saw her in uniform.
ambulance driver or
So
something.
then we see in this episode, I think we have an image here. This is not the image that I'm looking for. That's okay. There it is. Gretchen George, this plaque in the background, and Brandon did a good job identifying that sort of looks like an EMT logo at the top there. And it says Gretchen George, Dispatcher of the Month.
But we saw her in a uniform.
We did.
We did see her
in
in
another
uniform
episode.
a
So
couple
she
of
obviously
episodes
wasn't
back.
a teacher.
I think that was just me misremembering. So now we know at least at one point, or maybe she still is an EMT.
It looked like,
And someone.
it either looked like a security guard or like a cop, or
Yeah,
I guess it could be an EMT.
I
It had a
initially
tie,
thought
though, didn't it?
security guard, but
Yeah.
someone in our work Slack had an interesting theory,
Yes.
which was maybe she was the EMT driver for Gemma's car accident.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because if it is a Lost style, everything is related and everyone has known each other, then maybe she showed up and was like,
We like that theory. We hope that we see, I don't want to see someone die in a car crash in real life, but I kind of hope we see it in the show. And I hope that, it kind of like if you've seen Agatha all along, the sort of like Billy Kaplan flashback that we get when he becomes Wiccan.
it's gonna be like
that.
where someone from Lumon convinces Gemma like, hey, like your car is having problems. Can we put this person inside it? And then they put a Gemma clone in there.
Whoa.
Push the car off the road.
bridge.
It explodes, and then that's the body that he saw, where he was like, I saw her sort of burnt body, which kind of looked like her because it was a Gemma clone. And then regular old Gemma is just sitting back at the office being like, I'm kind of hungry. What's everyone doing?
Everyone's hungry.
I feel like it's like a
second.
I love that everyone's hungry.
It's like a weird like source code thing. Do you remember the movie Source Code?
A little bit, vaguely.
A Jake Gyllenhaal joint. Great little movie, directed by David Bowie's son, Duncan Moon, I think is. No, Duncan.
No, Moon is another
Moon is
movie
another movie
directed.
directed.
Duncan Jones, something like that.
Yeah. Anyways, I don't want to spoil that for you if you haven't watched it, but essentially it's the idea that like they're using the brain of someone to reconstruct what happened. And I'm wondering if like whatever the result of the accident is, there was no fully formed Gemma left to like swap out. It was more that like we have her brain and we're trying to recreate her, and they've grown a new Gemma, but they're using Mark to kind of complete the like brain puzzle to make this Gemma, this indie Gemma, like fully formed.
That
and,
would be
like,
cool because
cognizant.
Reghabi at one point says like the real Gemma, is still in there, and it's like maybe she's not. Maybe
I think
Gemma.
it's like it's a brain hooked up to a machine. Or something like that.
Well, we see her walking
We've
around.
talked about brains
Right, but
and
that's
jars a lot.
the like grown Gemma that because they can make internal
They're-
people. There's innies, and then there's like the people that Lumon grows.
And then there's
themselves.
clones. I mean, we've talked about brains in jars on this
We
show
have talked
a
about
lot.
it. Yeah, we love a brain.
We love
in
a brain
jar.
in a jar.
We got a lot of nasty brain stuff in this episode, which we're going to
Oof.
get to
Oh, yeah,
in a
some
sec.
Yeah.
more
I want
body
to
horror.
first talk about Mark and his relationships with Helly and Helena.
This is the first time they had this is the first time she has sex. Like her innie has
Right.
sex.
She never had sex before. They make a cute little Lumen, almost like a pillow fort.
I mean, they
so that
recreated
they
the
can
tent,
hide.
right? They
very
recreated
similar.
the tent because she wanted her own version of that experience.
Early in the episode, one of my favorite lines from this episode, Helly says, "Did everyone have their balls severed in the elevator?" This is in
love
regards
her.
to.
Yeah.
What did I say? This is in regards to the note that
Yeah.
The hang in
Irving hid.
Which
for
I asked
Dillon to
last
find.
episode, why did he not just take it? And everyone was like,
'Cause of
oh,
television.
maybe like blah, 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 blah. But I do like that he was just like scared.
Yeah.
I think. Well, it's also Dillon has this like he gets to go to a room and talk to Gretchen.
Yeah.
which he has not told anyone about. I'm still pretty sure.
Oh, no, he hasn't.
one else has
He has
any-
not. I thought he was going to this time, but then he just walked away.
He knows if he gets caught with this note, that privilege is gone, right?
Yeah,
So it's like,
yeah.
I totally see why he's doing this. Lumon's done a great job of like separating everyone, right? It was Cobell who said like, you have to make them feel like they're free.
Yeah.
And it's like this false sense of like, oh, they've got all these things. They're getting to roam around. They're fucking in the side offices. It's like,
Yeah.
how do they not know? They know that Lumon's recording everything and watching everything. So it's like they're still doing it because they feel like they're getting away with it. But I feel like Lumon is aware of what's going on.
You're right, but the manager of the severed floor at this time has his eyes off the prize.
Yeah,
that's
he
true.
Is
They're
looking down the barrel of a bunch of,
and we don't know who the head of security is now, right?
Yeah,
Ever since
we know. We assume it's Drummond,
Granger or whatever got
hasn't
killed.
necessarily been
labeled. There have been a couple of people that were like, "Oh, is Helly gonna get pregnant? Is she trying to get pregnant?" I would love it if E Dillon impregnates Audi Dillon's wife. And then he has his own progeny because he loved it. He was like, I like looking at pictures of my progeny.
He refers to them as offspring in this episode, which is so Lumon.
Well, and they refer to sex as sharing vessels, which was wild.
Well, yeah, which the first time he was like, we shared a vessel, I was like, oh my God.
I mean,
but then he does get to like, I mean, we like had sex. And I was like, thank God, say it like that from the get-go,
By the way,
man.
the scene where Helly is trying to encourage Mark to have sex is the most man versus woman scene when it comes to that kind of thing I've ever seen in television, where Helly is very clearly being like, I want to have that experience with you. And Mark's like, I could tell you about it.
To me, her face in this episode, this actress's face as both Helly and Helena is some of the best acting I've seen, because when she is talking to Mark and is like, I'm like mad, and she's like getting all hot, and she's like, I'm mad that like, you know, she had that experience and I don't. And then she's like, but it means that you wanted to with me and I want to. Would you like that? And then it like pauses as he's sort of like trying to think of the right thing to say. And her face is like, and she's just like all eyebrow work. Right. And then later when it's Helena at the restaurant, she's like, oh. And it's like insane faces that are clearly what she thinks should set him at ease, but are so disturbing. I was like, this girl is giving good face in this episode.
Right.
I loved it.
She's giving good face?
She's giving good face.
And she was also giving...
No. Dan Erickson and Ben Stiller have talked about how, like, season 1, the innies are kind of like babies, right? And season 2, they're more like teenagers. That makes sense, right?
I'm glad they're not toddlers, because that would be weird.
Sure. Well, I mean, yes. But this is like Mark S., right? And from his perspective, he had sex once.
Yeah.
And
now he gets to have it again.
Well,
but he thought it was with Helly R. It turned out to be with Helena. He feels betrayed, but then he's also reconciling with the fact that, like, Helly probably feels like betrayed, assaulted, I don't know. And so when she comes to him with like, hey, do you want to, I'm sure in his mind, he's like very carefully like, I don't want to like be too presumptive or like jump at it. I want to make sure you are 100% on board and that you are Helly
and okay, which is why I like when he was like, yes, and they were like, yes. And I also love, I mean, he somehow, this innie managed to answer every question properly, because then she's like, how did it compare? And I was like, dude, don't answer that.
Trap question.
She's like, what's your body count?
Yeah.
Don't answer.
Kisses her, and then bloody nose. I thought this was such a fun, tiny little bit of writing that they did not need to do, which was Mark was like, oh my gosh, you're bleeding. Turns out it was him. Because of the reintegration, we assume.
Right.
And then we get Miss Huang coming in with the blood pressure monitor that I thought was so funny to be branded Lumon.
Everything is branded
Now, here's my
Lumon.
question for you guys. Is that just because this show has a killer art department and they can do what they want and that's a fun detail? Or do you think that there's like a deeper layer
like
to this medical stuff with Lumon and all
I
that
maintain that this is like a Disney town where everything is Disney branded.
Indeed, design these things, right?
it is I think that everything in this Lumon town is Lumon branded. I think that they are a company that doesn't, I think it's like how Apple demands that every single employee has an Apple phone. I think they don't want to give money to anyone else. I think like it's they make everything in this town. Every food we've seen is a Lumon food.
And even more than that, I think anything that's on the severed floor is made by O&D.
Yes,
because it can't ever come from the outside because there's too much of an opportunity of someone to slip a note or something into something.
Yeah.
So they just make it internally.
Yeah, but and they don't want to expose them to the outside world.
Right.
Like they don't want to be like Doritos.
Yeah.
Whoa, a Sam's Club.
Yeah,
Awesome.
we saw what one book did, right? It like totally blew everyone's mind, including Seth Milchick, who again that still rubs me weird. Is that like that book really affected him? Interestingly, considering he goes out in the outside all the time.
I don't think it did. I think it didn't affect it. I think he was probably just.
He was secretly reading it. He was secretly reading it. It was blowing his mind.
But he was probably doing it to like try and I don't know.
I'll also say with the blood pressure, I'm not a doctor. I didn't know what she says if it correlates with what we're seeing on the thing. Like because I'm either like she doesn't know what she's doing, or like
she
it's
took
giving, like,
pride
a
in this.
fake
I think she was
meter.
very excited that there was a
she's-
crisis that she could
This
do.
is wrong. Don't, if you have a bloody
you're supposed
nose,
to go forward.
don't lean your head back because the blood will drain to your stomach and you just
Yeah,
start puking.
you're
everywhere.
supposed to go. You're supposed to
Gotta
go forward.
Pinch at the top.
That's
go forward.
how he's going to get a note to his innie. He's going to swallow it.
No,
No,
they
we
have
found out that
detectors.
no, they
Roll out
can't. They have detectors for the inside. Helly tried it.
And then Milchick puts on a glove and goes after it.
One way or another.
Grow!
So, a little bit further into the episode,
Right.
Mark is so hungry. He's a hungry little boy. So hungry that they
starving.
give him 2 fortune cookies at the restaurant,
Yeah.
assuming he's ordered for a second person.
By the way, most relatable part of this episode.
that
If
is
I
like
had
a
nickel
nightmare
for-
DoorDash order where
If
it's
I
I
had a
get 2
nickel for
fortune
every
cookies.
time I've gotten 2 fortune cookies and 2 sets of chopsticks, and I'm like, I need to
The 2 is
crush
fine.
It's
It's when you get
so
like 3 or 4.
hurtful.
That's
where you're
true.
like,
That is
ooh.
true. I said
so
2, but what
hurtful.
I really meant was 3.
Love that little detail.
I took the 2 fortune cookies as like Gemma and him went to the restaurant a lot.
Oh.
And like
no,
small
it's
town.
because he ordered 2 meals worth of food.
I took it to be like maybe they came a lot and he's used to getting 2 cookies. And
I was really worried throughout this episode that I know that theoretically Petey is the only other one that we know that has been reintegrated.
Right.
But I was worried with the nosebleed that Miss Huang was going to sort of start putting 2 and 2 together. I
mean,
was
I think
worried
so,
with
yeah,
him
right.
eating all that food and Helena commenting on it and then him coughing. But I think that not enough people have been reintegrated that they know the signs.
But there is definitely, like, if you extrapolate the world out, we don't see this happen, but flickering between 2 personas and then answering a question that someone has.
Yeah.
well, that's
asked
also like
you
a
in
time
a different
jump too,
space.
right?
And
Yes.
she asks him, doesn't she say something like, have you been having hallucinations
Right.
and seeing things that aren't there?
So I do think that that's going to be.
I also think that Helena is aware that, you know, he had a bloody nose in the office.
Oh.
Like that was reported up, and she goes and now she's seen him at this restaurant and he's coughing.
I
She's
mean, it
like,
would
it's not
track.
just like an accident in the office. Like,
Yeah.
there's
No,
multiple
I
things.
think she desperately wants love. I think the line that she
That's
said,
true, yeah.
where she said, "You would be the first," meaning you would be the first man that I took home.
bring
home.
I think that was real. She presented it as a joke.
100%.
I think it's real.
Because it's presented as like kind of the first severed person to meet him, right? And then it's like, oh,
Well,
you
that-
meet first.
I think it was like, hey, we're doing jokey banter. And I
Right.
think it was so brilliant because it was a little bit of like, oh, they are sort of having this flirty moment, but it's also unsettling, but then it goes back to flirty, but then it's unsettling. And you can tell that Mark is having that same reaction where he's like, are we flirting? Am I unsettled? Am I pissed?
And I think
And that's
that
like-
this-
sorry.
No, just harkens back to that moment that Helena has in episode 2 where she is analyzing the kiss between Mark
Yeah.
and Helly. And we all kind
She
of
wants
interpreted
it.
that as a
Yeah.
lonely moment.
I was gonna say
I
like,
think it is a lonely moment.
well, and even just either she's trying to act like Helly R because she knows Mark S is attracted, or she knows that any Mark is attracted to Helly R. So maybe she's like, if I act more like Helly R to Mark Scout, he will be attracted to me, right? Because
I think he wants her to be attracted to the real her.
when they were, yeah, that's what I mean. Well, yes, and this is the way she's gonna do it, by acting like Helly R, and then she traps him in a loveless marriage, and now he's stuck there forever. Because when Helly R and Mark S, the innies, right before that kiss, they were joking about like, what if we're married on the outside?
Yes.
You forgot this, honey. Oh, haha. And it's so awkward and weird. Like, I take this like awkward, weird flirting to be either that's just like Helena's personality, and even that comes through in Helly R, or Helena's trying to act like Helly R in that moment by being weird and flirtatious.
I think it is her personality. I think everything is like her like even when she's like, I'm like the head of the company.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, you're like trying to look good on a date.
Right.
Like that's a thing that you would like want a date to know. Like, hey, I'm the president of the company. But then she's also self-deprecating when he's like, oh, you invented this. And she's like, no, that was my dad. I was like, oh yeah, she's like trying her best to flirt. She's never done it.
She's not good at
before.
flirting, yeah.
If anything, she's probably only fucked goats. I think that's what they're doing on Lumon. They're trying to get people to fuck goats.
And maybe one of these goats was named Hannah. Okay,
I think this
is
was
the weirdest
another-
moment from this scene.
She's
an
negging. She's
intentional-
negging you
Yes,
on purpose.
yeah, no, also she's like doing a little dig
Yeah.
at the wife. Like she's like, oh wow, your ex-girlfriend, she looks like she has a good sense of humor.
So you don't think that is You think that that's a flirtation manipulation, not a Lumon manipulation?
I think maybe it's both. But I do think it reads like a woman jealous. A jealous
I think it also
woman.
reads like, I don't know that much about you. I don't know your wife's name.
I do think it's both. I think it's a Lumon
You're not that
manipulation,
important to
but
me.
Also, she obviously knows her
Right.
name isn't Hannah.
Right.
What do you
Yeah,
think?
So there's just some weird. That was such a weird moment.
What is?
That was
what
one
is
of my favorite scenes.
What does
mostly because
Mark's
of the food?
What does Mark Scout know about?
What does he know?
What exactly the thumb of this video? What does he know right there about him and Helena? Does he know that his innie fucked Helena?
I don't. Here's the thing.
Because she knows that she fucked.
Yeah,
Mark's innie.
I don't think he does. But I do think
certainly
it's
not.
interesting when he says, like, yeah, I know who you are. Because
That's interesting,
we've
right?
talked a lot about, like,
The parking lot?
Irving, not, like, yeah, like, on the outside, people, like, how many people know who she is? Is she a forward-facing head of the company? Or has she been kept in the shadows? But to me, this reads like, oh, she is a public figure. And Mark sort of knows enough about this. But we've so far seen everything he's flashed back to. We've seen him sort of wake up on the table, and we have not seen that. I don't think, at most, he sort of sees Helly, Helena, and Gemma's faces, like sort of switching between. But I think in this moment, he's like, oh, I know that woman. Wait, how do I know her? Oh,
He
I
doesn't
her.
know it happened on the Ortbo.
I don't think he knows.
I think so.
Did you tell Helly that you fucked her Audi on the Ortbo? It's my favorite line of the series.
Yeah.
I also think that, like, I don't know how much Mark is trusting these flashes. You know what I mean? Like, if that was happening to you, I don't know if that's something that's happening in my head, or if these are real
'Cause he's
memories,
still-
or what's happening.
Because they did show, like, right before that, he was having a hard time even remembering the thing he just had. Like,
Right.
Okay. So I like level setting that.
I don't
he
think
doesn't
he knows.
know yet.
I don't think he knows. I don't think he would be that good an actor.
Right.
I don't think he would be like, oh, this
Now, do you think him saying, like, I know who you are, is that because since the overtime contingency, he's done more research into the company, and yes, he knows who she is now, but when he almost hit her with her car, he had no idea who the hell that was.
I think, like, the car moment can be explained because it's, like, just such a split-second thing. He was his blood was probably pumping. He wasn't probably thinking, and also he could have been like, shit, I almost just killed the head of the company, but like not really reacted. I think he just knows the head of the company. I think he knows who she is, but also I think there's a lingering feeling of, because when he's watching her and she's like, well, he's like, what the fuck is going on? I think there's also a lingering of like, oh, that's the head of my company, but also something else that I can't put my finger on.
Because I mean, you guys know, like, if you're in like Los Angeles and you're walking around, you can like walk by a movie star or like a TV star and like not even recognize them or know who
I've
they
literally
are.
walked up to people and been like, did we take an improv class together? And they'll be like, no, I'm Brad
Angelina
Pitt.
Jolie.
Yeah.
Oh!
Improv exercise.
They're not together
group mind.
anymore.
Don't let them be on a plane together.
Group mind.
Hey.
Like,
Gaga.
let's move on. Another Mark interaction with Reghabi. We see them at the beginning of this episode. Very interesting. Reghabi says to Mark that Gemma is essential. Is
Okay.
the word she
Yes. Yeah.
And,
I mean, they talk about
obviously
Cold Harbor and stuff,
we've
yeah.
speculated about why she's this. I would agree with that statement. I only bring it up to say it seems like maybe our theories are getting closer to the truth, or
Right.
something like that.
Do
It
you-
does feel very important, but there's not a lot beyond that right now.
Do you like that about the show? Do you like that
we're guessing
Mark
correctly?
S is the most important person and he's who is our protagonist for this show?
Well, we've talked-
Does it feel too convenient? Is it real? Is this just stuff they're saying? Because they say it
Yeah.
not to him. They say it in private conversations.
No,
about how
but I think
important
like
it is.
we've talked before about Cold Harbor, and we said like there are basically like three things. Like it
Right.
could either be sort of a red herring that it's just like something that Lumon considers important, but is very stupid. Like he's designing the perfect snack.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something.
yeah. I mean, what a great
could not
reveal.
do that.
What a great
No,
reveal at the
I,
end.
Could not do
I
that.
know, but like
All of them are dead, and it's just like, finally, we've got the perfect snack.
But that also is in keeping with cults, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
Like with Scientology, it's like you need to go clear, but that is meaningless. That's
Right.
sorry if you're a Scientologist watching.
No,
It's
get
a
out.
made-up thing.
If you're a Scientologist, get out.
It's a made-up thing that's meaningless. So if it is something like, yes, Cold Harbor is the only thing that can help us go clear, and a real person was like,
Yeah.
go clear is not a thing. This is what you've been building up to. Like, I'm just saying that's a possibility that the writers could have done. It also could be something very important. It could be he's the only one that can literally save the world. The world outside of this Lumon paradise has been destroyed. He's the only one that knows the virus that kills the zombies that will let us go beyond the walls of this paradise. Whatever.
Is that a real theory? Can I chuck that into the Gina was wrong category?
None of these are real theories.
Episode?
Zombies.
Or it's like, you know, like it's a very personal thing where Cold Harbor is like, oh, we need to revive the founder. He's like, Mark is the only one we're using his grief to sort these numbers, which are a stand-in for something else. So those are sort of the three things that it could be. And I think that it, like, depending on which one it is, it's like either Mark's important because of his specific type of grief, or he's just important because, like,
his connection to Gemma or something.
Yeah, like because of his connection to Gemma, or maybe like Cobell was the one, because we saw Cobell was like obsessed with him at some point.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think they spend just as much time on the others, so it doesn't feel like a, hey, here's our protagonist, and also he happens to be the most important person on Earth. We spend time with all the others too.
But to your Lost point, I do think that there is a world in which these other innies are also connected for whatever reason. Maybe you could probably make the argument like, oh, I don't agree with that take because Lumon was willing to dismiss all of them.
Yeah, they were like, bring in
and
Bob
maybe
Balaban.
they are replaceable, but I do think the show will.
They're only
tie
there
into
to
this
keep Mark
somehow.
working.
Yeah.
Right.
But I do think that now that they realize that they're essential to Mark's work, they have taken an interest in them, which is not good, because like now they're like, yeah, let's search Irving's home.
Yes.
Let's give Dillon visits with his outie wife. I think they've taken a bigger interest in them now that they realize, like, if they go away, Mark's not going to finish Cold Harbor. So we got to find out everything we can about these little people.
Is Dr. Reghabi only eating cake frosting to survive?
Gotta wonder. She doesn't have her eggnog, so what's
I
left?
know.
It's gotta be like
I
a
know.
weird sugar thing, right?
I do think here's a theory that I literally just pulled out of my asshole.
Here we go.
Whoa.
If Reghabi,
Will you wash it first, please?
No, never. It's a frosting spoon. Here's the thing. If Reghabi was one of these clones and was raised in, or was raised in Lumon, you know how like a lot of, I don't know if you've ever met a kid whose parents
Never
were
met a
like
kid.
Really strict about their food when they were little.
Yes.
Who, when they grow up, they're like going ham. Like
Right,
I have a buddy whose like mom was like no sugar, and now as an adult he's like, you can get discount Easter candy, and I'm like, you're an adult. How much Easter candy can you eat?
That man's name? Willy Wonka.
But like maybe Reghabi was raised in Lumon and her diet was strictly controlled, and now that she's out, she's like, fuck
Cake
it,
frosting.
I'm gonna eat cake frosting and drink eggnog and whatever else.
Maybe
she's
because of
got.
the zombies, that's the only food that's left.
Chinese that have a long
That's it.
shelf life.
Yeah. And Christmas mints.
So after the Chinese food,
Right.
Mark has sort of like a fuck this moment.
Yeah.
Because he's had this conversation with
talked to
Helena.
Helena.
As he should.
And so he goes back to his basement and they do the procedure. They flood the chips very specifically. And we're not going to show any of that imagery. If you want to watch it again,
That hole seemed huge,
It is,
right?
for it.
it is interesting that it's
Huge
still
hole.
in there.
Huge hole.
It's still
Huge
in there. Like, she didn't
hole.
pull it out. She was like,
it's
we're going to
still in there.
it.
They flooded it.
I would imagine that, and this is my question too, if like the ultimate goal of reintegration is that in theory, if he goes down to the severed floor, nothing happens and he stays Mark.
I think
Scout?
the ultimate goal is that you are 100% you at
So
all
you're-
times.
and you
with
have all the
both your
memories.
memories from
Right.
the innie.
You're
and
But
keep
the
it
essentially,
together.
the NE is gone and the memories remain.
Well, I would assume it would be whatever the more dominant personality
Right.
would be, but I think the innies
Okay.
are sort of
Moon
still,
Knight.
I think the innies are sort of still, you know, like we talked about this last time, all the innies have an aspect that their outies are desperately wanting or missing. So like Irving on the outside was terribly lonely. So on the inside, he made very close friends. Like he was very protective of Helly and very close with Dillon. You know, like on the outside, Mark was so sad and so depressed and so pessimistic. So on the inside, he was very much like, hi, who are you? And very it's almost like a part of themselves on the outside that they're missing. So I think once they're reintegrated, they're more fully, and like Dillon on the outside is floundering and can't keep a job. And Dillon on the inside is like, I'm the best at
Right.
work. I am the best at this. I get every waffle party. I get to see every person in a mask that's an animal fuck every other person and do a weird dance while there's an egg
I would
party.
work hard for those waffle parties. Those are worth it, dude.
But I think once they're fully integrated, the idea is like you become a whole person. So Mark isn't as big an asshole as he is. He's got a little bit of that asshole Mark and a little bit of that optimistic Mark.
My concern is that like flooding the chip, because essentially you want the chip to stop working, to stop doing the switch. If he goes on the elevator and like it doesn't work anymore, wouldn't that alert Lumon, I guess?
No, he would have to be like.
I would think there's probably like a confirmation that it happened, right? The ding noise, but probably something in the system that's like, yes, they flipped. Don't worry, they're fine.
That's a good question. Maybe we'll find that out. But the question I have now is there more to do medically
well, yes,
for this
he's
reintegration?
passed out.
Obviously,
right?
he has like some kind of seizure or something like that. But I mean to say, in terms of the reintegration process,
is he totally done?
Done, and it's just maintenance now, and maybe like
do you think it's all performative and it's not really doing anything?
No, I think clearly doing something.
He's phasing in and out.
Sure, but I mean, is that
was PD fully? Do we think PD was fully, because he did have both memories? Like he was like, "Hey kids, what's for dinner?" And he's like, "Oh, sorry, that's like
right."
That's like a.
But he didn't have control of them.
But I thought at that point PD had sort of had his memories, like when he said, like, just so you know, like we were like really good friends.
Right, but I mean, he still was wandering around and didn't know where if he was on.
But I think that's because
he wasn't doing the treatment.
Right, I think he wasn't doing the treatment. I think Reghabi hadn't learned as much. But I do think like this is it. I think the rest of the season we're gonna get reintegrated Mark, who is sort of like slowly, I don't think you can be flooded with all those memories at once. I think your brain would explode. Sure. I think he'll slowly get certain memories back until he has both memories of both people.
Don't you think the innies will hate Audi Mark?
Yeah, I mean, Audi Mark is so hateable. Let's be real.
Well, I want to talk about that. He is. And he's been an asshole to Helly R last week. He was an asshole to Reghabi this week, and an asshole to Devin for which he apologized. You can't be an asshole to Devin.
She's got a terrible
But
husband.
I want to say something very specific, which is this happens to people who get brain cancer. A lot of times their personalities will change. Yeah. I've had, unfortunately, firsthand experience with this. Mm-hmm. You lose a person changes when they have brain cancer sometimes. And I'm wondering if this treatment and severance or reintegration specifically is what is causing Mark to be acting this way, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of things. I think he, the first shot we get of him is like him like crying in his car. So he was obviously deeply depressed after his wife died. I think it's a combination of everything. I don't think you're supposed to fuck with your brain.
Wise words. Wise words.
Yeah. Stop it, people at home who are about to drill a hole in your roommate's head and see what's in there. And
trepidation is a bad idea.
But no, I mean, I think it's a good theory. I do think that it's like, I don't think it's any type of, I mean, this is essentially like brain damage, right? Like you're cutting off half of the brain, but I think once it's fixed, I think he will be an asshole some of the time and a nice guy some of the time.
Maybe. One other interesting piece in this scene is that Devin and Reghabi now know each other. They've met now.
Also, Devin is the most real character.
I love Devin.
I know that a couple episodes ago when I wore my
but she's still a real character.
Like people were like, "Oh, Gina's giving Devin vibes," and honestly, that's the best character you can hope to be. Yeah. Because like she's like, "Who the fuck are you?" Like, and she's like, "Don't touch her." She's like,
"This random woman just came out of my seizing brother's basement,"
and that is how you would react. And I love that. Like she's always like, even when he like yells at her, she's like, "Okay, fucking asshole." Like I was like, yeah, she has the most genuine reactions on the show. And I realize she's one of the few unsevered characters, but also her husband is insane. Yeah. He's an insane man. I want her to smother him with a pillow in the night.
They could just get a divorce.
Nope, smother.
Not good enough.
Smother's easier.
Not good enough.
Don't deal with the lawyers.
So this is interesting because Mark says to Devin, don't worry about it, I'm doing something myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Now he's no longer, it's not just him and Reghabi, it's Devin and him and Reghabi. And Devin has seemed almost equally as interested or even more interested at times to get to the bottom of this Lumon stuff than Mark has. So be very curious to see Reghabi sort of has the medical side of things. Mark has sort of the He's the ability to be there in person and
Right.
do that kind of work. But Devin has this sort of like espionage vibe.
Yeah, she
to
can
her.
cover for him.
Yes.
I do also love that she brought up the pregnant severed woman because we have not gotten a
little crush.
mention of that woman
Hey.
since then.
Break up with what's his name? Rickon.
Rickon and go find that pregnant lady.
Also, she left the baby with Rickon. to
I
come
mean,
over to her
maybe
brother's
she
house.
has a. He does seem like he would be an attentive dad.
I bet there's
still,
a nanny.
he should
I bet there's
be
a nanny.
smothered in.
He does not. He's not an attentive dad.
He's probably like testing his lines out on the baby. He's like, "Hey, baby, what sounds better? If I'm talking about the clock as a timeless thing that's always there and comforting, or if I don't do that?"
We're gonna get into all of the Burt Irving Fields stuff in a second.
Okay.
We're going to take some of your questions at the end. But before we get into that, we want to thank some of our sponsors today. We're all about getting the best possible sleep at the Breakroom, which is why currently Brandon and Gina are snoozing while we do this ad read. And we're stoked that Miracle Made is one of today's sponsors. Miracle Made makes some incredible sheets, bed sheets. That's the word that I was looking for.
Holy shit.
The temperature of your sleep has a huge impact on the quality of your sleep. I don't know if you're like me, waking up in the middle of the night and being like, oh, okay, I gotta throw on a sweatshirt. If you've been constantly waking up because you're too hot or too cold, you gotta give Miracle Made sheets a try. Miracle Made's fabric was inspired by NASA, so it's also thermoregulating. That's a big word that Mr. Milchick is not allowed to use anymore. That means you'll have sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. Plus, these sheets are crazy comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands. Plus, Miracle Made's sheets are infused with silver that prevents bacterial growth. Bacteria can clog your pores, causing breakouts and acne, so sleeping on Miracle Made sheets is good for your skin too. Upgrade your sleep this year. Go to trymiracle.com/breakroom to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our code BREAKROOM at checkout, you'll get a 3-piece towel set and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/breakroom and use code BREAKROOM to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/breakroom to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode.
Also, thank you to Bird Dogs. You might not be able to tell when we're sitting here at the break room desk, but we are people who wear pants. We don't just Donald Duck it around here.
I do.
Trust me, Gina does. And it's offensive. We like to wear comfy pants, and you know who makes comfy pants? Bird Dogs. They make khakis that are good looking and comfortable. The fabric's just the right amount of level of stretchy, so you can move around, but it doesn't have that weird sheen you get with stuff from other companies. I'm not gonna name them. We also really love their classic quarter zip. It's the perfect thing to toss over a t-shirt as you're leaving the house this time of year in LA. It's not too heavy, it's not too light. Plus it looks classy enough that you can pass as an industry elite if you gotta. I went to the grocery store wearing one of these quarter zips and people thought I was a director of a movie. And they kept giving me headshots and like giving me their pitches. And I was like, get out of here.
Wow.
I'm just a regular dude like you. If you want comfy clothes that'll make you look like $1 million for less than $1 million, check out Bird Dogs. For a limited time, our listeners get a free hat with any order when you use code BREAKROOM at birddogs.com. Get their best-selling hat completely free when you use code BREAKROOM at birddogs.com. Support our show and let them know that we sent you. Once again, use that code, it's BREAKROOM, at birddogs.com and get their best-selling hat completely free. Thank you, Bird Dogs.
Speaking of savings,
Okay.
discounts,
Okay.
Yep.
numbers,
Connect those dots. Connect those
okay,
dots.
Okay.
numbers.
Numbers.
Irving's house gets broken into. Well, I
Not
shouldn't
broken
say.
into,
Yes,
they
he
have
has a key. He has
That
a
means
key.
that Lumen has keys to every Lumen house.
Yeah, that big ring of keys was
Oh,
playing.
so funny.
And first try.
So funny. First
Yeah.
try. So a lot of people online, and I don't necessarily disagree with this take, a lot of people online are saying, oh, Burt has set Irving up. He has invited them. He has invited Irving over for dinner so that Drummond can have a guaranteed window of time to get into that house and snoop. Sure, It's very much a possibility, and I
You
like
can't
that.
rule it out.
I like that. But I will say some things that we've been speculating, Brandon, you've missed this, is that those phones, the payphones, could be tapped.
Sure.
It's also very possible
Company town.
that Drummond is just aware that Irving has plans to go out this day.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more risky because you can't get a phone call being like, oh, he forgot, his medication and that he takes before he drinks or whatever and has to go.
And that's a big guy. He's not moving quick out of the house.
That's right.
He also can't hide behind a curtain or something like that. Like, those keys are jangling. He can't sneak around with those keys.
So that's my question, I guess, for you guys off the bat. Do you think that this was a setup, or do you think that Lumon is just good enough?
I think. Here's the thing. He's such a good actor. Walken is such a good actor. And during this, he was giving him so many long stares. And I was like, I don't trust that. But maybe it's just Christopher Walken.
But even Burt was Burt was like that, right? In the first season, he would be kind of weird and
and
that's Walken.
But I do
to
think, I do think that Burt is higher up at the company than we think.
Yeah.
I think he's worked there longer than he's letting on. I think the fact that he tells his husband, tells Fields, no, you're wrong. It wasn't 20 years ago. Because Irving is wasn't Severance. But also Irving has proven that if there is a mystery, he gets to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
So I would wager, remember when he was a night gardener? And then doesn't say anything for 3 episodes. And he's tell us about the night gardener. And you're like, oh, this dude has been putting 2 and 2 together.
Totally. So, and I want to get more into Burt and Irving in a minute here.
Sure.
But there are some interesting kind of numbers that come up in this episode. We've talked a lot about when this series takes place.
Well, we saw some current day money.
We saw current day money. We also saw some current day years. There were all these documents that belonged to Irving, a list of severed employees, and the first the earliest year we see is 2008. We get this 2008 moment, or 2009, as it's sort of noted there.
Yeah, Andrew got severed in June 2009.
A lot of these employees we've sort of looked into and are people who work on the production, so it's not necessarily they are seeding, new characters. In fact, Amy Baker is a name that's on that list, is a good friend of mine. I thought maybe he worked on the show. It's a different Amy Baker. But shout out to you, Amy. I'm sure you're not watching this video. And so we get this 2008 number, and then something that we were sort of discussing as a group here is we also get maybe 2019. But this is now stylized as 11-19. You can see Doug Coleman.
Right.
Also, I want to point out very fascinating car crash is a listed sort of a piece of information under his name, which we've, obviously Gemma died in a car crash.
Sure.
Allegedly. Brandon, you think that this is month and day rather than month and
11-19- is weird.
It seems like they left the year off.
Perfectly left the year
we've
off.
talked before about it's not, they do have sort of these old cars, but we've also seen things like technology that is current. And so if it is a misleading year, I think it's further into the future that we think, not further into the past than we think. Like if it is, let's say 2045, and that's why we're seeing things from all different eras. And maybe at some point society stopped working after a certain year and they're like, yeah, gather up all the cars we got. Some of them are going to be from 1982. Some of them are going to be from 1995.
Yeah. To me, it reads like, the Principality of Egan is cut off in a weird way, a la Cuba, where a lot of the cars are from the 50s. And they just keep fixing them because that's what they have.
Right. Yeah.
Where
people aren't sending their imported, exported goods to Lumon.
And because maybe the Principality of Egan's not that big, they build everything in this town, right? But they don't need to build cars. They're like, we got all these leftover cars.
But that 2008 or 2009 to 2019 does fit in a 12 or a 20 year window. So we think that could be something. Maybe this show's set in 2019, 2020, a pandemic-less universe.
I think it's late. Possibly. I think it's into the 2020s somewhere. I think maybe these dates are still earlier.
Not totally sure. We got one other sort of piece of paper here that is interesting to me only because obviously Burt's name is on it with an address. That's fine. We know, obviously Irving knew where to go find him at the finale of season 1, but it sort of lingers on Burt's name, and then we get a close-up of Drummond to indicate that that character is focused on Burt. So whether that means that he knows Burt in particular or that Burt is some kind of target of Lumon, I don't know, and I wanted to kind of jog that past you guys to see what your thoughts were.
I still think maybe it means he's a high up at Lumon, and Irving was like, okay, here's who lives near me. This guy is the vice president of operations or something. Because someone did point out that Burt and Fields' house is very luxurious.
We have an
looking.
image of that as well. They've got 3 ovens.
Yeah.
A bunch of copper pots and pans.
2 ovens.
It could be a microwave. Whatever it is.
Compared
that
to
is a
Mark's
very nice house and Irving's house.
Right.
In another angle,
pretty bare bones. Even compared to Cobell's house, which was pretty crappy.
In another angle, they have both a coffee grinder, an espresso maker, and a coffee maker.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So unless Fields is doing something crazy, unless Fields is like crazy rich or something.
Sort of seems like a stay-at-home husband to a degree.
Yeah, or we also haven't seen any white collar jobs that aren't at Lumon. We saw guys who make doors at a door factory. We've seen a woman who's an ambulance driver, but we haven't seen sort of well-off executives unless they work at Lumon. So I would wager that this is Burt being high up at Lumon, having a lot of money.
I also thought all the salt and pepper shakers on the top of the cabinet were very interesting.
I couldn't figure out what those were.
I assume that's what they were. They looked like matching pairs.
For a moment, they looked like crosses, some of them, and I was like, oh, my religious family has done that above their kitchen. But they're not all like that. Could be
something that when they take a vacation, when people collect
I thought that too.
They're all the same type of wood.
That's what rubbed me the wrong way. Is they look so similar. Hacks, right? She collects salt and pepper shakers, but they're very eclectic. They look very different. These all look specifically very similar of the same wood. I'm like, is this Fields? He's stuck at home all the time. He's like, I'm a woodworker now, and he made all of these salt and pepper shakers, and they're like, crap.
Maybe it's how executives at different companies, the X amount of years that they've been there, they get a prize. Maybe Lumon's you've been at the company 2 years. You get
the exact same pepper shaker that we gave you last year.
Now it's been 4 years. A slightly different, updated salt and pepper shaker.
Wait, right at the end of season 1, Fields and Burt were about to go on a trip to Michigan, I think he said, or something like that. Or I don't know if they said where they were going.
Yeah.
But Burt earlier this season was he was mad we didn't get to go we canceled the trip, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that's part of this weird thing too. Either they travel a lot or them leaving at that specific moment was very important because of Burt's position at Lumon. He needed to get out of town at that specific moment, and Irving kind of ruined that. I don't know. The whole thing is very weird. And during this dinner, I think Burt is framed very demonically. He looks like the devil. He's wearing a black kind of sweater turtleneck, and he kind of blends into the background except for the fireplace behind him. Almost frames his head like the Wizard of Oz with flames around it. Very, very menacing, very creepy.
He's the man behind the curtain?
Yeah. And again, some of that is just walking is always very kind of menacing and weird.
Well, they sort of call him devilish.
They call him Attila, right?
But they call him Attila. They call each other Attila.
Yeah.
But Burt refers to himself as, I don't remember the exact word he says, but basically he infers that he had a lot of sex in his youth, right?
Yeah.
It's not even that. It's he was a bad guy.
Yeah.
He was going to hell.
He was listen, I was on a boat one day and I was fucking another man and his wife came in and she was so shocked that she fell into the water.
It's not their fault.
And neither of us saved her.
I cannot relitigate this case. I cannot.
I bet 90% of our audience is like, I don't know what they're talking about. Yeah.
White Lotus. Fields says something really interesting when they walk in. And he says to Irving, "What's mine is yours."
Yes.
And then later in this episode, he means his husband's penis. That's what I think a lot of us took from that. But then later in this episode, Gina, you and I were talking about this earlier. He says that he wanted Burt to get severed so that when they're in heaven, Audi Fields, we assume, can be with any Burt.
Because, based on something their pastor said.
Yeah.
While Audi Burt burns, he says specifically.
Which also could just be a story that Burt told him to justify him getting severed if Burt was like higher up at the company and he was like... But also we could take it at face value and say this is true.
Well, and the line that Fields says is... Actually, it's shared. It's split between Burt and Fields. They say, the pastor says... as if he's been listening to our conversation, and then talks about like severed people being having their own souls and that kind of stuff. But like, do you think that there's a world in which the pastor, the Lutheran pastor in Kier PE, is a Lumon employee or whatever, and is saying this stuff to encourage people to become?
Yes, of course.
This feels very
church. This is Church of England stuff where it's like, oh, my church won't let me get divorced. I'll make my own church.
Right.
Yeah, this is pure church propaganda. The church is not known for being, accepting of new stuff. So the fact that they immediately
say that again?
Nothing.
Oh, I was gonna do a spit take, but it's okay.
I was afraid of it.
The fact that I thought it was a trap, and then Brandon was gonna take off his clothes. And
no, I was gonna say what a shocking development
underneath
that the church has made some bad decisions.
But no, they like this to me reads like either they're a Lumon employee or Lumon told them like, hey, we want as many people to get on board with this as possible. Tell them that innies go to heaven. Yeah. Tell them that they have
separate.
A soul.
Yeah.
I mean, like religious people, super religious people don't even believe animals have souls. I don't think they're handing out extra souls.
Well, don't you think though that lesson is like kind of antithetical to what Lumon wants people to believe? They don't want you to think that your innie is a totally separate.
But if they can get you in,
I think
does it make a huge difference? I think it's also interesting if I'm writing this episode as, and maybe this is because I was raised Catholic, I would pick Catholicism, Roman Catholic, to be the more extreme example of Christianity. They pick Lutheran.
That was interesting.
Obviously, Martin Luther was someone who didn't like what the church was doing and broke off and started Lutheranism, kind of.
But also not exactly a welcoming religion. I mean, it's not like he was like, here's what I don't like about Catholicism. It's exclusionary.
Right.
He was like, I
didn't
like all
the
that stuff.
indulgences.
But, he's like, I like all that stuff, but you guys shouldn't spend so much money.
I just thought it was a very interesting choice to have like someone who might be labeled as like a contrarian and that faith being the chosen faith for these two people from a writing perspective.
I mean, Lutheran, like, they are like Catholics, except they don't believe in like megachurches.
And they don't think that like the body of Christ is literally the body and blood. So like, there are some differences in the dogma of those two faiths. Doctrine? Dogma.
Dogma.
I'm sure there are differences in both, but I thought that was an interesting choice.
Yeah.
To have sort of
to
like
go with that religion.
The religion of the fuck this doesn't make any sense to me. I'm starting my own thing. Like you kind of talked about the Church of England.
Well, and it is interesting too, considering, the church's multiple section of Christianity is like not accepting the homosexual lifestyle.
Not now, but maybe in 2050 when this show might be set.
But that these seem to be two seemingly religious people who are still religious and have gone through this whole thing as part of their religion in like a weird way.
Yeah. Although, doesn't it sort of seem like Fields believes it and Burt is going along with it?
It does feel like Burt is appeasing Fields as much as he can.
And I do know there are some people who are thinking like, oh, maybe Burt actually is not a severed employee and he actually is in love with Irv. They were sort of flirtatious off of the jump in this episode.
Yeah.
There is a look that Burt gives to Irving when he's leaving that looks like he has some guilt, whether that be because potentially he set up this thing with Drummond or because he feels bad for Irving. One of the things that crossed my mind, I don't think this is the show for this, is a Irv murder-suicide. If Irv sort of feels like he's lost his life, imagine... I think my innie is going to heaven, and I think Burt's innie is going to heaven. Fuck Fields. I'm going to kill...
Interesting.
I'm going to kill Burt to be with him and then kill myself.
I don't think
that crossed my mind.
But I did think it was I loved Walken's delivery on the you, me, and Fields?
Yeah.
Or you and me.
Or you and me.
And then also, I mean, these guys are both so good. And then also Turturro being like, oh, of course, Fields. but either is fine. And I was like, God, it was such good. There's a lot of good acting in this episode.
Yeah. We haven't even
their
talked
dynamic
about
is perfect.
Fields' casting. This is something that we were so excited about.
Yeah.
John Noble, incredible actor.
Yes,
you want to go into the Fringe stuff?
Yeah, so I am a huge. I've rewatched Fringe. It's great, like 3 times. It's sort of like the X-Files, except it doesn't last as long. But John Noble plays a character who takes out a part of his own brain to basically like prevent other people from getting certain memories. And so a large portion of the show is him finding these slices of his own brain and putting them back in. And as he does, and John Noble on the show is like very bumbling, very sweet. His son is played by Joshua Jackson, who's sort of looking after him.
Anna Torv is great in that show, who was just in The Last of Us and Mindhunter.
Yeah, and Joshua Jackson
Leonard Nimoy.
Yes, that spoils it. That spoils it. Okay, but like Joshua Jackson.
Sorry, you didn't watch Fringe 20 years ago.
It's great. You should go back and watch it. But Joshua Jackson is like, my dad's an asshole and you're not an asshole. And as he's putting these slices of brain back in, he's becoming more of an asshole. Anyway, there's a parallel universe and 2 Joshua Jacksons and one of them dies and John Noble steals him because he's
I'm the one spoiling
it. Does get a little messy.
It gets a little messy, but
there's like an evil Anna Torv character.
Is that it's
there's
like
a world where 9/11 didn't happen, guys.
There is. That shot was great when it aired, by the way. But it is basically John Noble taking out a part of his own brain because of sort of corporate espionage type stuff. So the fact that they cast him in this show is such he's a great actor. I'm sure they wanted him regardless. Right. But there's a whole generation of people who I feel like is probably the demo for Severance.
Yes.
That like watched Fringe and watched him put pieces of his brain back in, reconstruct his brain, have medical problems because of it. Half of him was an asshole, half of him was a sweet guy. And that's essentially what Severance is. That is like, you can boil it down to a log line and they're very similar.
they're similar in the log line, but then very, very different.
Right. Go watch Fringe.
But it is good. It's this might actually dissuade people, but like J.J. Abrams, executive producer, created by Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman, who went on to do a lot of DCEU stuff, but also did the more recent Star Trek movies. It's a very fun ride. The pilot is fantastic. The cold open is amazing. Michael Giacchino does the great score.
Yeah, and it's also one of those shows that like gets better at like even like the first season is great, but it is sort of X-Files-y in that the first season is sort of like a mystery of the week
type of thing.
And then as you get into it, you're like, oh my God, there's also all this lore.
I think X-Files was better when it was Monster of the Week.
Whoa. Take that, Vince Gilligan, you bitch.
I love that the camera lingered on you for a second to really hammer home.
I think once we were like all about the Greys and I didn't like it.
So then, we were talking about this a little bit, the difference between 12 years or 20 years.
And this is a reference to how long Burt had been
They had this conversation about the pet name.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, I remember this time, it was 20 years ago, Burt Fields says this, because I remember we were having drinks with your Lumon partner.
Yeah, which also, does that mean sexual? Does that mean work partner?
I think work partner in that.
But also, severed employees don't know each other on the outside.
Right, but if he was working, if he wasn't
socialize.
Severed yet, if he was just working at Lumon.
But then the next line is, well, hasn't Severance only been around for 12 years?
Right,
the implication
and then he's like, yeah, it's
only
confused.
been at Lumon as a severed employee with that line.
Also, 12 years of Severance seems like a cover-up. Like, clearly, you didn't just one day wake up and you're like, hey, we have this new procedure. That's something you test out. So maybe he is one of the first.
He was an early adopter.
Yeah.
Well, the Lord wanted him to do it.
Yeah.
I also have a theory that the Fields we meet, was an innie that Burt fell in love with and brought the innie to the outside and killed off the Audi Fields.
Wow.
And only innie Fields remains on the outside. And that's why he's a little kooky. He's drinking all the time.
But wouldn't he remember his time?
Well, I think he knows he can't talk about it. But I think it's just like fuzzy for him.
Yeah.
Or maybe they wiped whatever work he did at Lumon, and now he's this Audi, or this innie who's living an Audi life and doesn't know what's going on. Because I find
innie in the streets, Audi in the sheets.
You know it, dude.
Well, this is very interesting.
Because I think it kind of tracks with the woman who was giving the baby, who was like theoretically, we think, severed on the outside, was never inside of a building where she was severed.
Yeah.
She was severed on the outside, just walking around as a severed
Well, we
person.
know from the Glasgow block and from the OTC that they can do whatever at any
Right.
time. Once that chip's in your brain, don't let people mess with your brain, kids.
No. That's the second time we've begged you not to mess with your
Listen,
brains.
I don't want them.
Every day I walk into the office, Gina hits me on the head with a baseball bat, but I'm still
That's
here.
different. That's different.
It's interesting you mentioned Fields is drinking. There's two moments in this episode, and I should say, Burt specifically asked Irving to bring wine, which is
expensive wine.
Which is kind of interesting. But when Irving first presents the wine to Fields, thank you. First of all, the label on the bottle of wine translates to goat in Spanish. We'll take that for whatever you'd like. But as soon as Irving gives that bottle to Fields, Fields shifts his focus and looks at Burt to kind of do like a "is it okay" type of thing.
And then wine.
Obviously, at a certain point, Burt asks Fields to take it easy with the wine, and John Noble takes a very specific sip.
Yeah.
And then I also bring this up.
Hey, Fields, I've been there. I've been there, man.
Brandon, stop
When your
partner gives you the old.
Fuck someone
Your partner
else.
gives you the old. Don't you think you've had enough? And it's
like,
like, I'll decide when I've had
I'm
enough.
drinking.
I'm at home. I'm not
flirting.
driving tonight.
You're flirting with him, and I'm sitting right here.
That's Brandon.
You wanted to
Spears
do this
as
for the
an
whole
eye-opener.
episode.
I've been waiting a whole episode.
Now you gotta sit in your own wet.
But I bring it up again because on the Severance podcast, Ben Stiller makes a point to talk about it. So there's something important here that I'm sure will be brought up in future episodes, but it's not quite clear.
They purposely show Irving fiddling with the bottle too before he goes in. Kind of like a nervous, like, am I doing this moment? But I think there is something with this wine. And I think, bringing up, just thinking about it now, right? The kind of religious connotation, what the role wine plays in religion, the blood of Christ, the Jesus turning water into wine. Like wine, it's one of humans' oldest creations that we love so much. Turning delicious fruit from God into sweet, sweet alcohol, baby.
Well, predating potable water, right?
Yeah.
And it's a poison that we put into our bodies that alters our state. It's all very interesting.
Well, and Burt also says, like, he's going to be embarrassed in the morning. So, maybe it was a little bit of like, hey, I want my hot any boyfriend to come over. You get drunk, so the next morning when you're like, you were flirting with him, I can be like, no, you were drunk.
You were drunk. Don't you think you've had enough, Fields?
I even told you to stop drinking, babe.
Fields, turn on all the ovens.
So
I want 4 pies for dinner.
there were two pies sitting out.
There was so much food in that.
What are we going to do? Feed
way
him
more
loose
food.
corn?
There's
And then they do.
vegetables.
He gives a very good compliment
Listen,
on the corn.
How, like, loose corn, that's how you eat. That's sometimes how you eat
sometimes.
corn.
Sure, I guess, if you're living in a garbage can or something.
Before
Loose corn.
Before we fully,
It's just called corn.
it's just called loose corn.
Just put something else with it. It doesn't have to just be corn.
Well, I
think it was
assume they
probably
had one of the
seasoned.
2 pies.
Yeah, it was probably seasoned.
And there was a glaze. There was a cumin-based glaze.
And he gave him some leftover ham.
That's right.
Got to return that Tupperware, by the way. That's how they're going to meet next.
We've sort of that's a good point. We sort of danced around the answer here because we don't have one. But like, what is going on with Burt and Fields and this whole, like, there's a lie happening somewhere. What is the lie and why is the lie? Does anyone have any good thoughts?
I think Burt's
there?
lying to everyone. I think Burt,
Including Fields?
I think including Fields. I think he's not telling him the whole truth.
Yeah.
I think that's why when Fields was going on his like religious rant, like Burt was like, cuckoo. Okay,
Christ?
yeah, I think that Burt, I think that at one point they were probably in love, but Burt has been an employee of Lumon, a very high up level employee of Lumon, and for whatever reason, like recently, maybe he was even a honey trap for Irving.
Yeah.
That's what I think. Maybe they were like, put him down there, have them accidentally run into each other.
I guess
we can find out how much Irving knows. He's been falling asleep at work and having nightmares about a hallway. Honey trap. That's my theory.
I like that. I mean, I think Burt's been part of the company for a long time. He was maybe one of the first severed individuals. I think Fields isn't any that he brought to the outside. And like, that's, he's just kind of like stuck in this weird situation. But yeah, I don't know what his end game is necessarily. If they're obviously Irving's talking to someone on these payphones,
Well, he's leaving messages for someone.
He's maybe part of whatever the resistance looks like, the Free Mind Coalition. And Burt's job is to kind of suss all that out. And yes, I agree with like the kind of honeypot idea that like he was there to pull Irving aside to see what he can figure out. And maybe Burt was never, he was pulling a Helena where he wasn't getting switched when he went downstairs. And that was all a lie. Even the weird retirement video thing. Yeah. It's all very strange. Because that Burt in that retirement video doesn't seem like the Burt we're meeting on the outside. I think it was like a weird act.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I like all these theories.
What's your theory?
I don't have anything that I feel really strongly about.
Gotcha.
I
think that's fair.
You have some strong opinions about corn recipes, though.
I do have a lot of strong corn recipe feelings. I think a cumin glaze on a ham is a little weird, but that, whatever.
I'm sure there were other flavors.
Sure.
Yeah.
I want to take a couple of questions from the chat.
I'm sure they're begging.
I see Eli Finelli has sort of queued a bunch up, so we'll take some questions.
Let's do it, Eli.
Here's a question. If Dillon finds out about Mark's reintegration, do you think that will influence Dillon to be like, get me reintegrated so that I can have a wife?
Yeah. I mean, any Dillon is ready to murder Audi Dillon and take his wife and kids.
I think any Dillon wants. And also, Audi Dillon sucks. Smother him with a pillow. Two men on this show smother him with a pillow.
I agree
he
that...
needs to be told how to make
Gina,
cookies.
I might call the cops on you after this episode because I think there might be several men dead at your apartment.
We're definitely throwing away all the pillows in the office.
Cops know me already.
She's working with the cops. I do think I empathize with Audi Dillon only in the sense that my partner works very hard and has a much more stressful job. And the fact that Audi Dillon's job is I don't even know what I do with my job. I go there, I come home, I fuck around, I watch TV. And sometimes I feel that way when I'm when my wife is like, how was work today? It's we were having a great time. We watched a movie. We were talking about all this. And she's like, great. I hope you fucking enjoy your crappy life.
But then you go home and you cook. You don't need to be told just slice the cookies.
He's definitely,
for God's sakes, just slice them.
You just slice them and bake them. It's on the packaging, Dillon. Just try a little bit.
He needs to pick up the slack in other ways.
I agree.
Is what I'm saying.
I agree.
Here's a fun question from Drogo that could have a quick answer. We've never seen the board. Do you think Burt could have been a board member?
The board?
Or could be a board member?
I would love that.
Natalie always got to talk to him on a phone.
Yeah. We had a theory that they were severed brains in a jar.
Yeah.
And that they're just like brainwaves.
Yeah,
and they're not human, which is why they never actually speak.
I ascribe to that theory too, where there's something weird with Keir Egan being recycled or whatever he calls it, returned or whatever. But I do think the board is it's not a bunch of humans. Right. It's a weird thing that talks to Natalie. Yeah. And Natalie interprets it however she does.
Yeah, it's just like a and then she's the board's done.
It's very Minority Report, things in goo.
Yes.
Or to go back to source code, it is like a brain in a machine. Or the new RoboCop kind of did that too, where all that was left of RoboCop was like a brain stem.
Crazy to admit that you watched the
in
new
one
RoboCop.
hand. I did watch the new RoboCop on a plane.
Oh, that makes it okay.
I refused to pay money to see that in theaters. It was a huge disappointment.
Oh. You were punching people on that plane, I bet.
I was. I gotta get over this plane!
Here's another question from Eli or Ellie.
I think it's Eli.
I think it's Eli, but Ellie Finelli rhymes really well.
Oh, yeah.
We're a little bit more than halfway through this season at this point.
Yeah, only 9 episodes?
I think it's 10. It was 9 episodes season 1, 10 episodes this season. We got 4 more.
They better be working on the other ones now.
I'm going
to smother Ben Stiller with a pillow.
Ben Stiller has said that the ending of this season is, I'm paraphrasing here, but as much of a mindfuck as the end of season 1.
And sort of cliffhanger-y, yeah.
What do you think that cliffhanger might be? The final episode title is called Cold Harbor. Where are we going and where are we going to see the end of this episode? Do you think there's 4 more episodes of Mark trying to reintegrate?
I think that it's because of the fact that the mystery, the goal for this season has been to find Gemma. I think that by the end of this season, he has to find Gemma.
He's going to go down the elevator.
He has to go down that elevator. You can't stretch that elevator mystery. And not to do this again, but classic writing is your character has a goal, you give them that goal, and it is not what they wanted. So I think he has to like meet with Gemma. He's probably by this point fully reintegrated. And maybe when he meets with her is when he learns she's a clone. She's not his Gemma. Or maybe she was in a car accident and like her brain was badly damaged and the only way that they could keep any part of her brain was to sever the damaged part of her brain. So she actually has no memory of her life.
She can't go back
She
to
only
other
is
Gemma.
an innie. I think that you have to give him Gemma, but she's not going to be what he wants.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
It does feel, I mean, I don't know how long this show plans to go.
Apparently someone in the chat said Ben Stiller just made a joke about season 4 at a panel.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like kind of the Harry Potter thing of by book 7, you're like, we're not gonna be at the school anymore. We're not going through the same motions. Like, I don't think, I would expect by the end of the season, we can't see MDR the same way it's been.
Right.
I mean, they're barely doing numbers anymore, right? Like, barely doing their work.
Yeah.
And some part of me misses that, like, kind of the simplicity of what the show was in the first season, where it's little discoveries here and there. Like, are we ever gonna see mammalian nurturing ever again? We've barely been back to O&D. I think we're gonna learn who this weird doctor is with the whistling. I think we will go down the elevator, and I think we will see what Gemma is at this point. But that will be the cliffhanger, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And then season 3 is it like, do I dismantle this company? I think you make a great point of getting what you want, and it doesn't turn out to be that.
Right.
It could be a situation where Mark Scout has to be like, no, I can't destroy Lumen because I need it.
Right. If it is that like,
Yeah.
Gemma's a clone or Gemma's an innie and he wants his Gemma back.
Yeah.
I also think I mentioned this like a couple weeks ago, but with books like Silo, each book, this isn't how the show is doing it, but each book is about another silo.
Right.
So if you do want the show to run 6 or 7 or 8 seasons, you just go to a different Lumen office.
Yeah, that's a great
we've
point.
already seen Bob. I would watch a show with Bob Balaban at
Like this is the most important Lumen office? Question mark? Because this is where Egan is.
The Egans are.
Yeah,
where they grew
who
up.
knows? Maybe every Lumen office is telling the same lie, and they have different Egans.
Or you go to like you go to like the Lumen office in like Southwest Florida, and
Yeah.
What happens up there?
I mean, listen, White
We're
Lotus,
pretty chill down
White
here.
Lotus
Like, we can make
changes
energy
cast,
Yeah.
changes locations every year on White Lotus. So
Yeah.
let's go to Lumen, Italy next season.
Lumen, Italy. I'm excited. Okay, one last one before we wrap up from sort of a similar idea from two Sarahs, both Sarah Simonova and Sarah Hatchadorian.
Oh, okay.
Asking sort of about the time of all of this. We got a reference
How long
from
it's been?
Helena to I'll get to the specifics in a second here. Helena sort of says refers to the overtime contingency happening a few days ago. It was the implication.
Yes, but we knew
so
that.
The time is really crunched.
Right,
Obviously,
yeah.
we knew they were lying about the 5 months.
I mean,
stuff,
it's been winter this whole time.
Yeah.
right?
But like I thought it had maybe been a couple of weeks since then, but it really seems like it's been a few days.
Yeah.
Their questions are sort of like, how disconnected in time could the Audi stuff be versus the Innie stuff? Is Mark having these like reintegration flashes to a period in the past? Because obviously,
Or the same day,
at some point he is, right? He
because
he
Reghabi
goes from
says to him,
Miss
"Oh,
Wong
that's a
to
recent
Reghabi.
one."
That's
Yeah.
a recent one. So like, what does that gap look like, and could it influence the storytelling of the show somehow?
Yeah, I mean, I did actually think that last night when specifically Reghabi said, "Oh, that's a recent memory. That's not
that's
you
good.
waking up on a table."
Right. It's not
I
you
was like,
seeing
"Oh,
Gemma
they
coming.
could again. This is the thing that Lost did, where you think it's a flashback, but it was really a flash forward. So this could be like, did Mark have these Innie experiences 10 months ago, and we're watching it? I think that they will stick to everything we've seen in this season happening over a period of maybe 2 weeks. I think Innie stuff, because they tried to make it seem like it was 5 months, but then on the outside when he's still discussing it with Devin, it sounds like it was just yesterday. I think they'll stick to like a 2 week period where they're like, yeah, this all happened in 2 weeks. It feels like it's twice as long because there's essentially 2 different versions of you. That's my theory.
Well, and even Mark, saying that Mark Scout saying I was walking around describing what he saw, and then he's like, I was talking to Gemma and she was saying all these weird things to me. That wasn't even necessarily a memory, right? That was like a weird.
No, that was when he was in wellness with her, and she was like, "You're."
But they were standing in the hallway talking. They weren't in the wellness office. He wasn't having like that memory, and we never saw Gemma say those things to any Mark. Now, whether or not she did, or Miss Casey, we never saw her say those exact things to him. Maybe she did at some point, but I doubt it was standing in the hallway like that. So he's having memories, but they're also getting merged with things that that didn't happen.
I
So
do think he's confusing
it's tough to tell
Helly
time.
/ Helena a little bit, like when he's boning and he's like switching between the ladies.
This has been a very great conversation. I really appreciate it with you guys. It's been a delight. I love doing these episodes on Fridays. I cannot wait for next week.
Yeah, it's been fun to be on this episode. Thanks for letting me say my insane
Gina.
things.
That's it for us today. Please give us a follow on Twitch. Subscribe to us on YouTube. We do these videos live and then we post them after the fact. But come hang out with us live. Ask questions. We'll try to answer them as best we can. Follow Breakroom NR on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. Hey, we'll see you later, guys.
Latest, guys.